Hi, my name is Kevin. I'm one of the co-founders of PluginLab. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the whole process of creating your very first ChatGPT plugin with an Express.js server stored on Replit, and then we'll install it on ChatGPT. So by the end of the video, I will also show you some tricks so you can make things easier and, for example, track your users and authenticate them. So let's get started. So first, you have to understand what a plugin is exactly. Basically, what we'll build today is a plugin that allows users to list some coffee flavors and then ask for detail about a specific coffee. So it will be very simple. And how to do that? So first, you'll need an API. An API, if you're a developer, you already know what is it. But if you're not, you can think it as a web server that will expose some functions over the web. So what will happen here is your users will send some requests to ChatGPT. Hey, can you list me some coffee flavors, for example? And ChatGPT will understand that and try to talk with your API. And it will send a request to the API, and your API will eventually respond with some responses. And then ChatGPT will format the response, and the user will be happy because he will have everything he needs. So now you probably ask yourself, okay, but how does ChatGPT know how to use my API? Yeah, that's a fair question. So basically, we have to provide a bit more than that. So we'll need to provide three things. The first one, we've seen it already, is the API. So we'll provide a web server, so ChatGPT will send requests and get some responses. The second one, and one of the most important, is the manifest file. It will have to be exposed on a given path, which is .wellknown/AI plugin.json, and we'll cover that in a minute. So the manifest file will give some basic information about your plugin to ChatGPT. What's the name of your plugin? What's the description of it? How it could use it? And it's a way to, describe in a general way, in a general manner, your plugin. So basically, ChatGPT will first fetch your manifest file. But now we still don't know how does ChatGPT know how to use every single specific endpoint of the API. This is not the role of the manifest file. Actually, the manifest file will make reference to what we call an open API specification. There is no constraint about the name of this one. We call it, in this video, we'll call it OAS for Open API Specification.json, but you can call it whatever you want. And this specification file will explain endpoint by endpoint of your API what it does. So this open specification file will make reference to your API and it will describe your API. So ChatGPT will fetch the well-known. The well-known will give some general information. It will reference your Open API specification, and your Open API specification will describe your API. So ChatGPT will be able to get all those three files and understand and use your backend. We'll cover everything in this video, so don't worry if you don't get everything yet. So let's start. So first here, I'm using Replit. So Replit is an IDE that allows you to write code online. And the benefit of it is you can write code and deploy it online in a snap. You don't have to deploy a web server. Replit will do it for you because you code on your browser and you don't have any deployment process. Everything is on the cloud already. So for the purpose of this video, I will use Replit. If you are an experienced developer, you probably want to use your local environment. Do whatever you want. You can host it even on AWS, GCP, whatever. Here we'll use Replit. I'm not paid to use it. It's just because it's more convenient. So I suggest you to start with Replit with a basic example. And the good thing about it is I will be able to give you the link of my Replit. So you'll be able to see it, to copy it, to tweak it, and to use it to start creating your first plugin. So here we'll have many files, but I will cover them one by one. What you'll have to do in order to start is to sign up to Replit, and then you'll just create a new project. So by using a Node.js project, you'll get an index.js file, which will be empty, and you'll be able to create all the files you need. So we want an endpoint that lists coffees, and we want an endpoint that get more information about a specific coffee. So the first thing I did is I asked ChatGPT to generate me a list of coffees. So it created this list for me. So I suggest you can create your own list with anything. I stored it in a file named coffees.json. That's it. Then I have my index file. So this will be my web server. So what I'm doing here is I'm using Express, which is a web server in Node.js, and I'm just importing my coffees. This is my coffee list. Here I'm importing my OpenAPI spec and my manifest file, but we'll cover that in a minute. Here on the line 6, I'm just instantiating my Express server. I want it to run on the port 443, which is a secured port. And I have my two endpoints here. So the first one is called /coffees/lists. And what it does is I go over every single coffee with the map function, and I just return for every single coffee the ID, the name, and the price. The idea here is just, I don't want to return all the data. I just want to return those three informations. The reason why is I don't want to return too much info to the user because I want him to use the detailed endpoint. And that's why we have this endpoint here. So /coffees/details/ID, and ChatGPT will be able to use this endpoint to send an ID and finally find a coffee with all informations of this particular coffee. So here I just try to find the coffee by ID. And if I don't find it, I return an error, which is a 404. If I found the coffee, I return the coffee. So then this is my OpenAPI spec and my manifest file. I will cover that later. And here I'm just starting my web server. I can run it basically. And now Replit is starting the web server. It just added a URL for me, so I can just copy this URL. And you can see an error here in the browser, which is normal because we don't expose anything on the root domain. We have some specific path. What I will do is I will copy that and I will just open it on my browser. And then I will go to coffees/list. And you can see my server is working because it returns me the list of the coffees. So what I will do here in this video is I will not use the browser, but I will use Postman instead, which is a free application. Perform my request in Postman, and I can now just, see the result, which is the same, but it's just displayed a bit away. I can try my detail endpoint, so I will check the path, and it's this one. So I will copy it, add it here, and I will add an ID. So, okay, when I ask for the coffee with ID 2, I get this one. When I ask with the coffee of ID 3, I get this one. And if, for example, I ask for a coffee that doesn't exist, I get 404, coffee not found. So my server seems to work. So now I have a working backend. I can start thinking about ChatGPT. And what we said is we first need a manifest file that makes reference to an OpenAPI specification, because we need to describe our API. What I suggest you to do is to start with your OpenAPI specification. So here I created a file named oas.json for OpenAPI specification that contains my OpenAPI spec. And to be honest with you, this specification has been created by ChatGPT. What I did is, so I gave the code of my NodeJS server, and I also gave some more detail about the responses so it can understand the schema of the response and generate the right OpenAPI specification. And ChatGPT just answered me with the whole OpenAPI specification. So obviously this method will not work if you are building something really huge, and really complex. But if you are just trying to test and you want to generate your OpenAPI specification file very quickly, you probably want to ask ChatGPT to do it for you. So here I just copied that and I stored that on a file named oas.json. So hopefully it will work. Now what we'll do is we'll open the index.js and we'll uncomment this. So we'll be sure to require this file and we'll create an endpoint to serve this file. So here I just created it. So now if I stop and rerun the server and I reopen it on Postman, I should have a nodeas.json endpoint. It works, it returns my OpenAPI specification. So ChatGPT will be able to fetch this specification. So now what we'll have to do is the manifest file. My manifest file is here. You can name those files whatever you want. The idea is that for the manifest file here, you have to respect this endpoint. This is very important. There is no format for the OpenAPI spec, but the manifest file must be /wellknown/AI-plugin. This is crucial. So what I did is I just went on the OpenAI documentation and you have a manifest file example here, which is in JSON. And I just copied it and pasted it here. And I just changed some information. So you have the name for human, the name for model, the description for human, and the description for model. I suggest you to read the documentation because you have some constraints to respect, especially for the name, the description for model. So I suggest you to go over the documentation by yourself. I will also do another video to explain more deeply those, what are the important things about the manifest file, but we'll see that later. So I just updated some fields. The description for model is especially important because it will explain ChatGPT how to use your plugin. So this is maybe the most important. For auth, for this, we don't have to change anything since we don't authenticate our users. And here, we have to change that. I mean, I changed it already, but you have to change that. Here, I just added the path to my OpenAPI specification. So do you remember, we have the OpenAPI spec accessible here from the server, and we need to make a reference here to that specification. So ChatGPT, if you remember well, will fetch the manifest file and will get the reference to the OpenAPI spec and it will fetch it. So that's the reason why we have this OpenAPI link here. Then I changed the logo URL and the contact email and legal info. So you see, there is nothing crazy here. It's very simple. You can just update those fields. Now what I will do is the same. I will uncomment this and require my file, and I will create an endpoint to serve it, and we can test it to see if it works. So I will go on my server. I will add that, send. Oh, there is an error actually because I didn't restart the server. So I will do it. Okay, try again. And it works. So I have my manifest. So ChatGPT will be able to fetch it. So now we're all set up. We have our backend server with our functions. we have the manifest file and open API specification. We can now install our plugin on ChatGPT. So let's do this. What we'll have to do is to open ChatGPT, and I will start a new conversation. I will go here on plugins, and I already have some plugins. So what I will do for you to know is you can uninstall your plugins. Here, by going on unverified plugins, you can uninstall your own plugins. Okay, so now I will go on develop your own plugin, and ChatGPT asks me the URL of my server, of my backend. So I will give that. I will give that URL here. And as you can see here, I don't give the URL of the manifest, but it will find it because remember, it knows the path well-known/ai-plugin.json. So I will click on find the manifest, and now it's fetching the manifest file. So you can see the manifest file is valid, but we have some warnings on the open API spec. The warnings are not something that blocks you. However, you should probably pay attention to them. So we'll pay attention to that. So here is basically saying that it's missing the operation ID for both of our endpoints. So what we'll do is we'll add that just to be sure ChatGPT has everything it needs. So we'll go on the open API spec, and I will add an operation ID, which is, I will call it list coffees. And I will add one for this one. I will call it get coffee details. It's a good time to tell you something which is vital. When you will generate your open API specification, most of the time here the server field is missing. If you add something like that, it's not going to work. So you have to create an absolute path to your backend. So this is vital. You have to add this, and the URL must be the URL of your API. Be sure you have here the URL of your API. Yeah, that's it. I will stop and rerun so we are sure the changes are live, and we'll go again on ChatGPT, and we'll start again. We'll start over the process. And now you can see our open API spec is valid. That's cool. We'll go next, install again. Our plugin is installed. It's ready to use. So we're done, guys. We can test it. So we'll say, for example, hey, can you list me some coffees? And boom, you can see ChatGPT used our plugin and is starting to list some coffees. He already knows the name and the price and the ID. He can't give me more information at this stage. But what I will do is I will ask him more information, more detail about some coffees, just to test it. Let's see how it works. Okay, so he's doing 2 requests, which seems okay. Yeah, and now he found more information about these coffees. So it works. That's great. At this stage, you're done. What you can do is, publish your code on Replit, and you can configure maybe a custom domain or whatever, and you can, update your code, update your API, and improve your plugin. The thing is, as you can see, we are kind of blind. If some users are using our plugin, we don't know what happens here. What I will show you now is a simple trick that takes 5 minutes to track all the users' events, and eventually I will also show you, or at least give you more information about authentication to authenticate your users. To do that, we'll use PluginLab. So let me show you how it works. First, we'll go on pluginlab.ai. I already have an account, so I will sign in. So PluginLab asks me to start with an example or to configure my plugin. Since we already created the plugin, I will click on configure. Now it asks me a plugin name. I will give it. You probably noticed already, but you can see it asks me for some information that are the information we need for the manifest file. So I will not re-add everything, but I will just copy paste the description for model, which is very important. And this is okay for now. So I will save that. It asks me for the OpenAPI specification. So since I have it, I will just copy paste it. I can import it from my file system or just open the editor and copy paste. So the good thing about it is if we make a mistake here, for example, that, and we try to save, PluginLab is going to check and tell us there is an error. Either if you make a mistake on your manifest file or on your OpenAPI specification, you'll know it and you'll not lose time on ChatGPT trying to debug because PluginLab will check that for you. So here, I will add that, I will save. And now PluginLab is asking for the backend server domain. And you remember, it was this value. I will add my backend API server here. And it says it doesn't want the HTTPS, so I would just remove that and click on save. Okay, now it asked me for the first version name, and I will show you why in a minute. So I will tell it's version 1, for example, and I will create my version. So we are on the PluginLab dashboard. If I go on plugin settings here, I can see there is a versions tab, and I can see this version is my OpenAPI specification and my backend URL. So for example, I could create a new version of it, which I will call version 2. I can create it and I can update it. And for example, I could update the description of this endpoint. And by the way, the description for every endpoint is something very important if you're creating some complex plugins. But I will cover that in some other videos. I will save this and I will click on Go Live to publish my new version of the OpenAPI specification. Now it's live. What I could do if I want is I can see I have two versions. I could open the first one and publish the first one again to roll back if I want. And I don't have to update anymore, the manifest file and the OpenAPI specification file here from my server. I could remove that actually, because PluginLab is handling that for me. I can version my OpenAPI specification file and I can update my manifest file directly on PluginLab. I don't need to serve them anymore. So I can stop that, rerun, and it will work. I will show you that in a minute. For example, now what I can do is go on plugin info and try to see if my OpenAPI specification is updated. So I can open the OpenAPI URL. And here you see the IP is not allowed. By default, when you create a backend on Replit, everyone can access to it. But PluginLab will protect your backend and will authorize by default only the ChatGPT IP addresses. So you can't access to your OpenAPI spec directly if your IP is not allowed, at least not by talking to PluginLab. So what I will do very quickly here is I will go on my IP address.com or something, and I'm going to whitelist my IP. So I can go on security, add a new IP. I will add this one. I save, And now if I reopen it, you can see there is my openapi.json file, which is served by PluginLab. And as you can see, we have the new description we added here, which is here. If you want to understand what's going on here, I have this schema for you. So basically, PluginLab will act as a proxy between ChatGPT and your backend. And PluginLab will handle everything for you. So the user management, we'll cover that later, the well-known file, the manifest file, the OpenAPI file, and the versioning and everything. And it will also protect your backend because it will restrict all the calls to your backend through the PluginLab proxy to the right IP addresses. That's the current configuration we just made. Now you probably ask yourself, yeah, but what's the benefit of it? You'll understand that in a minute because we'll install again the plugin using PluginLab. So we'll copy this URL and we'll go back on ChatGPT and we'll install this new version using PluginLab. So here you can see ChatGPT found the manifest file and the OpenAPI spec. We'll install it. I will put that on the right, PluginLab on the left, and I will show you what happens here on the user events section. Every time ChatGPT is going to make a request to your API, PluginLab will show you that a request happened. And you'll get a track of it and you'll know what's going on your backend. Let's ask some more things to see what happens. That's really cool because we are not blind anymore. We can see what happens on our API and we can track everything. So here you can see that we have a call which responded with an error. And we can see that this call was made by whitelisted IP address, which is my browser actually. And you can see that all these calls has been made by ChatGPT IP address. You can see some details of the calls. And if there is an error, for example, like here, you can see the response status and the response body. You can inspect everything and you can know what's going on your plugin. It's even more crazy because in 5 minutes, you can configure a user management system with authentication without a single line of code. And to do so, you just have to go to the members section and activate the auth schema. But if you're interested, I will tell you that in another video, so you'll have the link below in the description. And I promise the video will take only 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you will get a new plugin installed. You'll get a user management system with an authentication and sign in and sign up portal without a single line of code. That's it. We made it. We made a plugin. We hosted it on Replit. We installed it on ChatGPT. We were able to track and monitor everything on PluginLab. You're all set. You're ready to run your first plugin. Congratulations. I hope this video has been helpful, guys. Please let me know if you have any question in the comments below. You also noticed that on PluginLab, you have a join the community button. So you can join our Discord and ask whatever question you have regarding the plugin creation or PluginLab or anything. We will be happy to help. So feel free to reach out. Have a good one, guys. Take care.